What is a subtle sign that someone is really intelligent? When they explain something they make you feel intelligent. Explaining something complex is simple terms. Knowledge is so vast that they can talk about in the easiest way for someone else to understand. They can genuinely consider an idea which opposes their worldview without necessarily accepting it. They spend time thinking before asking a question. They aren't afraid to say they don't know the answer to a question. They know when their knowledge ends and say something to the extent of "I don't know and anything else I say on this topic is ignorant speculation." They can switch up the way they talk to match the person they are talking to without sounding condescending. They listen to how others learn and explain it in that person's language of understanding. They admit to changing their mind about something. They are curious about everything. To be intelligent you need to be knowledgeable, and you can't be knowledgeable if you are never curious. They say they love learning, and they learn something new every day. Then they listen more than talk. They let idiots have the last word because they realize that trying to argue any point with them is futile. You know the saying, the bigger man walks away from a fight. Same kind of thing with intelligence. I think intelligent people are more willing to calmly debate rather than argue. Like, you explain to them why you disagree, and they listen to you and ask further questions about your viewpoint before offering a different perspective, as opposed to an unintelligent person who would just resort to insults when other people disagree with them. Humor. I think that truly funny people are often very smart and cognizant of the different ways an idea can be humorous on several levels. They also know their audience. I think the difference between, say, a Jeff Foxworthy and a Dave Chappelle and a Bo Burnham is their audience and their interests. They are logical, and they find out more information rather than believing something right away. They apply knowledge from one realm into a new and relevant situation. For instance, one person described a situation might have been on Reddit, where they were a new assistant in an academic research lab and fixed a snag that stumped all the senior researchers, including the professor. The team was trying to video record their project using a strobe light, and their footage wasn't working as planned. When no one else made progress at diagnosing or solving the problem, the most junior individual spoke up and suggested that the strobe could be out of phase. They remembered that video typically records at a rate of 24 frames a second, and explained that, along with suggesting a change to the strobe's flash rate so it would coincide with the recording. This worked, and it really raised up that individual's reputation within the group. Inwardly they were almost embarrassed about the source of this knowledge. They had a gaming hobby back in high school and had taken some video footage of that and discovered the standard frame rate while playing around in editing software. But they remembered that detail years later and realized it made a difference in a completely different context. That is intelligence. You can honestly just tell by their vibes, the way they compose themselves, talk, write, think, explain, etc. What I find the most interesting is that intelligent people, in my experience, are more likely to be less cold/fact driven and more theoretical and creative. For example, if an intelligent person were to read a certain stat, fact, idea, etc., they are likely to have very interesting theoretical extrapolations. My friend qualified for the Mensa membership, and whenever we talk, his mindset always strays towards very interesting outlooks. He has certain ideas that I would never have even thought about. It's actually very fun to talk to intelligent people. The way they are able to absorb information like a sponge and apply that information is very eye-opening. Talking to people as if they are intelligent at their level and without being condescending or even letting on that it's lower than their level. I used to work with a Dr. Tom Howard, and the day I realized he was a genius was the time he guessed every single condition a patient of mine had, based on minute pieces of information about him. They understand what you're saying before you're even done with your explanation. There is also this lovely thing I like to call intelligence by association. I'm a prime example of this. My small rural town seems to think I'm a genius simply because I can read at a level above your average 4th grader, when in fact I'm a high-functioning moron. They listen really well and seek to understand when they listen. They draw wisdom from multiple sources. Wait, but that might be more wise than intelligent. But I guess those two tend to be seen together a lot. Dynamism and creativity. I really don't agree with that old notion of an intelligent person. As someone with social difficulties who's good at logical thinking, this is just one single possibility among dozens of others. This is more of a hit or miss one. But in casual conversation they are good at puns and wordplay. Making good puns, especially spontaneously, requires a high level of understanding in whatever language is being spoken. If they tell you a pre-constructed joke that has a punchline, that is a pun you can't really tell, because they could have had a lot of time to come up with it, like me for instance, or they could have memorized it from somewhere. But spontaneous puns generally mean they are processing your conversation multiple interpretations at once, in an intelligent way. One of the first cues for me is when someone speaks rather quickly, but pauses in the middle of a sentence, to think about what they are saying. They surround themselves with those who are more intelligent than they are. If you're the smartest person in a room, you know damn well to find a better room. As an English teacher, I'm probably biased, so take my opinion for what it is. That said, I can often identify a brilliant student by the way he uses written language. It's hard to explain. It's not just vocabulary, and it's not the concepts communicated in the writing. It's the fullness and maturity of the writer's voice, which encompasses the aforementioned and then some. The piece of writing often sounds like it could not possibly have been authored by the student. Intelligent people often go against the trends and immediately point out when something doesn't make sense. Even if it's supported by a large crowd of people, they often read things they disagree with in order to challenge themselves. Laughing at a joke a second before the rest of the audience does. At the grocery store, usually between customers, a until person will poke at the bags or wipe the belt or whatever to look busy. There's a young girl at our local store who busies herself as usual, except sometimes she will look around at customers, not open-mouthed 1,000-yard stare, but actually looking at customers. She was watching them, studying them. I spent almost 20 years in security, and the way she studied customers was exactly the way I did it. I thought it was very interesting. I shared it with my wife, who's a teacher, who told me she's actually one of the smartest students in the school. I knew it. People who get excited when they are wrong, like smart people, get disappointed too, especially if their misunderstandings are the cause of larger problems. But there's also a kind of underlying excitement of, wait, whoa, this works different than I thought. Interesting. To be able to shift perspective and scope of a problem with ease. For instance, if discussing economic issues, to understand the ramifications that a policy would have on people who aren't just poor, rich, urban, suburban, educated, ignorant, etc. Then, to understand how those audiences would accept or reject those policies. Everyone has opinions, but few people consider that to realizing those opinions into reality have consequences, and even fewer are willing to articulate what consequences they are willing to accept or reject. In simple words, it's just thinking it through. But I find this separates those who engage with topics from those who just wish for magical ponies while complaining about problems. Counterintuitively, when they are often a disappointment, I have noticed that many extremely intelligent people score very low on emotional intelligence. They usually display a pattern of specific biases and mental shortcuts that often sabotage their ability to be useful. For example, many are perfectionists and have very high standards for themselves. They often get enthralled with the how of whatever task they are given. They get carried away with thinking about very creative ideas and solutions. However, when it comes to execution, like anything else in the world, it won't be perfect, even if the final result exceeds others' expectations. Still, this leaves a mark on their self-esteem. Because they did not achieve their own expectation, they have an all or nothing mentality. After years and years of this happening, it begins to take a toll on their ability to function. The mental process of solving any problem becomes associated with the, often magnified, feelings of guilt and failure. They develop a failure anxiety, which usually manifests itself as procrastination to avoid the bad emotions. And this is when people around them start to notice, and people's reactions, for better or for worse, usually feeds into their bias. This perpetual guilt takes a toll on their mental, and for many, it ruins their lives. Most gifted kids either end up addicted to drugs or extremely successful in their adulthood. No in between. They are often seen as a disbandment because they display a lot of potential but fail to achieve that a lot of the time. They can also be really addictive, like a random game of roulette, especially in professional and social settings. This happens because when they follow through on something every once in a while, they can be extremely rewarding.